He said it casually, like canceling coffee orders instead of careers. The glass walls reflected his smirk, but the code repository reflected something else entirely. I didn't argue. I opened the log history and watched the color drain from his face. The conference room smelled faintly of roasted espresso and overconfidence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a trophy, all steel and sunlight, and at the head of the obsidian table sat the CEO's son, tailored suit, inherited authority, and a smile that had never once been audited. "No bonuses for 2 years," he repeated, tapping the polished surface with a pen that probably cost more than my first laptop. "We all have to tighten our belts." His gaze lingered on me a second longer than necessary. Not because I was the loudest in the room. I never was. I was the one who fixed what others broke. The one whose commits appeared at 2:14 a.m., 3:02 a.m., 4:47 a.m., quiet signatures in the code repository that kept the platform breathing. Around the table, chairs shifted. Someone coughed. Someone avoided eye contact. The air thinned. I folded my hands, calm, almost amused. Because numbers rarely lie, and logs never do. He clicked to the next slide, a bland chart. "Operational resilience improvements," it read. My architecture, my refactor, my core code, rewritten from brittle scaffolding into something resilient, scalable, elegant, no attribution, just a bullet point. My pulse didn't spike, it sharpened. "You'll understand," he continued, "that leadership has to make difficult decisions." Leadership. The word floated like perfume. Expensive. Synthetic. I opened my laptop. The screen's glow felt like a lighthouse in a room pretending to be daylight. My fingers moved without hesitation. Code repository, main branch, core module, commit history. The room hummed with the quiet arrogance of people who assumed silence meant surrender. It didn't. "Is there a concern?" he asked, noticing the keyboard clicks. "Yes," I said softly. "Clarity?" A few heads turned. The legal liaison, freshly appointed, careful eyes, stiffened. Someone from finance pretended to check messages. The projector fan whirred louder than it should have. On the screen, reflected faintly in the glass wall behind him, my repository log scrolled. Author, my name. Timestamp, 2 years ago. Commit message. Rebuilt core transaction engine. Stability layer integrated. Author, my name. Timestamp, 18 months ago. Commit message. Security patch series. Critical. Author, my name. Over and over. I rotated the laptop slightly, not dramatic, just enough. He leaned forward. "I don't think this is the forum for..." "For what?" I asked gently. "Documentation?" The word documentation is polite. It doesn't shout. It doesn't accuse. It simply stands there and waits for facts to catch up. His jaw tightened. The CEO, his father, wasn't in the room. Quarterly travel, strategic partnerships, legacy meetings. The son was filling the chair like a placeholder in an inherited script. "I'm sure everyone contributed," he said quickly. "Team effort." "Of course," I agreed. "Which is why authorship matters." I clicked into the core file. Thousands of lines, the spine of the company's product, the engine every client relied on, the architecture that survived last winter's outage, the one that could have cost millions. I remembered that night. Snow against the office windows, pizza boxes collapsing into grease-stained cardboard, my eyes burning as I traced a memory leak through a labyrinth of inherited shortcuts. He had posted an internal message the next morning. Great team recovery. Team. The word again. I zoomed into a particular section, a signature comment block, my initials, time-stamped, linked to a ticket I had personally resolved after escalating concerns that had gone unanswered for weeks. The legal counsel shifted in her seat. I believe, I said, still calm, that compensation structures should reflect measurable impact. His smile returned, but it was thinner now, paper thin. Are you threatening the company over a bonus? Threatening. There it was, the pivot from policy to personal attack. I leaned back. I'm referencing Revocation Section 9. Silence, not confusion, recognition. Every senior developer contract included it, a clause rarely discussed, almost decorative. Legal read Revocation Section 9. In the event of documented intellectual property misattribution or material breach affecting author credit, system access rights could be temporarily suspended pending formal review. Insurance, essentially. Quiet. Surgical. His pen stopped tapping. That clause is procedural, he said. So is payroll. A murmur rippled along the table. The legal counsel cleared her throat. If there's a concern regarding authorship documentation, we should review repository logs before finalizing compensation decisions. There it was. Not support, not opposition, just process. And process is where power hides. His confidence flickered, just once, like a light reacting to unstable current. You're overreacting, he said. Am I? I asked. I turned the laptop fully toward him now. The comet graph bloomed across the screen, a forest of branches, merges, and my name threaded through the trunk of it all. Not decorative contributions, structural ones. He swallowed. For 2 years, I had said nothing, accepted the subtle credit drift, the way presentations shaved names off slides, the way praise became generic when it approached engineering. But no bonuses for 2 years. That wasn't tightening belts. That was rewriting history. I think, I said evenly, that before compensation is paused, authorship should be acknowledged transparently. The legal counsel nodded slowly. We can initiate a review. He looked at her sharply. There's no need to escalate. Escalate. Another interesting word. I haven't escalated, I replied. I've documented. And documentation doesn't shout. It simply waits for someone brave enough to read it. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. The room felt smaller now, as if the glass walls were leaning inward. Let's table this, he said abruptly. We'll reconvene. Which meant he needed time. Time to assess. Time to calculate. Time to understand what the logs meant if someone outside this room examined them. I closed my laptop. I'll notify legal formally, I added, almost pleasantly. His eyes met mine then, not dismissive, not amused, alert, because he had just realized something simple and devastating. The core code wasn't just lines on a screen. It was leverage, and once legal counsel opened Revocation Section 9, the conversation would no longer be about bonuses. It would be about ownership. If you think this meeting was tense, wait until you see what happens when documentation becomes evidence. The email to legal counsel was only 3 paragraphs long. Precise, time-stamped, calm, subject line, request for formal review under Revocation Section 9. I attached nothing dramatic, just links, direct paths to the code repository, filtered logs, commit hashes, documented tickets. Evidence doesn't need adjectives, it needs structure. When I pressed send, the office felt unusually loud. Keyboards clacked with forced normalcy. Someone laughed too brightly near the coffee machine, the kind of laughter that tries to outrun discomfort. Within 14 minutes, my inbox chimed. Acknowledged, review initiated, access protocols under preliminary observation. Legal counsel observation, such an elegant word for scrutiny. Across the open floor, I saw him step out of his glass office, phone pressed to his ear. His posture had shifted. Less performance, more calculation. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. The air between us had already changed temperature. My system notifications flickered. Administrative audit request, repository permission validation, access review pending. It was subtle, but deliberate. He was trying to move first. I opened the code repository dashboard again. My permissions were intact, for now. But a secondary admin account had just accessed the core branch, not to commit, to inspect. A chess move. Interesting. The company had grown fast, too fast for its governance to keep up. Processes were layered like mismatched wallpaper, titles inflated, documentation deferred. Until now, none of it had mattered, until someone invoked Revocation Section 9. The legal counsel requested a joint review meeting for the following morning. Attendance, myself, the CEO's son, head of engineering, and legal. No CEO. That was deliberate, too. By late afternoon, whispers were circulating. Slack threads went quiet when I entered channels. A senior developer messaged me privately. Is it true you built the transaction core alone? Alone is never accurate. But primary author? Yes. I replied with a link. No commentary, just data. Minutes later, that same developer updated an internal wiki page, adding commit references under the architecture section. My name appeared where it should have been all along. Small correction. Big shift? By evening, the energy on the floor felt electric. Not chaotic, charged. People were rechecking documentation, rereading contracts, reopening their own commit histories. Because if authorship could blur at the top, it could blur anywhere. At 7:12 p.m., my access to the staging server was suspended. No warning, no explanation, just a red notification banner. Access temporarily restricted. Admin review. I stared at it for a moment. Then I smiled. Revocation Section 9 is reciprocal. If intellectual property attribution is under dispute, system stability responsibility becomes legally delicate. In other words, restricting the primary documented author during a review period creates operational risk, and operational risk has reporting obligations. I drafted a second email. Subject: Notice of Operational Liability Exposure. I outlined the recent suspension, attached uptime statistics, referenced last winter's outage mitigation, again with commit logs. Calm, factual, precise. I CC'd legal counsel. Within 5 minutes, my staging access was restored. No apology, just silence. He emerged from his office again, this time walking directly toward my desk. His expression was controlled, but something underneath it pulsed, anger restrained by optics. We need to handle this internally, he said quietly. We are, I replied. You're destabilizing the team. No, I said, meeting his gaze. I'm stabilizing documentation. His jaw tightened. You think logs make you untouchable? Untouchable? No, that was never the goal. I think transparency makes everyone safer, I said. He leaned closer. Bonuses are discretionary. So is leadership. For a second, the entire floor seemed to pause. Conversations dulled into static. He straightened. This isn't over. I know. Because this was no longer about compensation. It was about narrative control. That night, legal counsel sent a formal agenda for the morning review. Item 3 caught my attention. Evaluation of core code authorship and attribution records. Not contribution, authorship, language matters. I closed my laptop and stepped outside. The city air was cool, carrying the metallic scent of distant rain. Glass towers reflected one another in endless loops, mirrors pretending to be walls. For 2 years, I had let the narrative slide, let the slides omit names, let meetings summarize impact without detail. Not because I didn't notice, because I was building leverage. Back upstairs, my phone buzzed again. A system-wide notification. Repository admin change logged. My pulse steadied instead of racing. Someone had attempted to modify historical metadata. But here's the thing about modern code repositories. Immutable logs don't rewrite quietly. They leave fingerprints. And whoever just tried to adjust that history had no idea how many mirrors were already watching. Tomorrow's review wouldn't just be about bonuses, it would be about intent. And once legal counsel saw the attempted metadata alteration, the conversation would shift from compensation to compliance. If you thought documentation was powerful, wait until attempted erasure becomes evidence. If you've ever watched your work get quietly repackaged, tell me, would you have stayed silent or opened the logs? Morning light poured into the conference room with theatrical indifference, illuminating the long table where reputations were about to be measured in timestamps. Legal counsel was already seated when I entered, a slim folder placed precisely in front of her. No coffee, no small talk, just order. The CEO's son arrived 2 minutes later, perfectly composed, crisp suit, controlled expression. If yesterday had unsettled him, it didn't show, at least not on the surface. The head of engineering followed, eyes tired, posture cautious. He understood code, he also understood politics. Today, those two worlds were colliding. "We're here," legal began, "to review authorship documentation related to the core transaction engine and to assess whether compensation decisions were made with complete attribution data." Complete attribution data. A polite way of saying, were we honest? She turned to me first. "Please summarize your position." I didn't stand. I didn't perform. For 2 years, my authorship of the core module has not been publicly or internally attributed in alignment with repository records, I said. Compensation decisions were communicated without reference to documented contribution. I've invoked Revocation Section 9 to ensure proper review before further action. Calm, structured, factual. Legal nodded. "We've reviewed the code repository logs." She tapped her tablet, and the wall screen lit up. The commit graph unfolded in clean, undeniable clarity. My name threaded through the architecture like a spine. Primary commits, structural merges, critical patches. The head of engineering leaned forward, frowning, not at me, but at the data. "This is accurate," he said quietly. The CEO's son clasped his hands together. "No one is disputing contribution, but leadership isn't measured in commit volume." Volume, interesting pivot. "This isn't about volume," legal corrected gently. "It's about authorship and representation." She swiped again. A new screen appeared. Repository admin change logged. Attempted historical metadata modification. Timestamped yesterday evening. The room cooled several degrees. My heartbeat remained steady. I hadn't mentioned it. I didn't need to. Legal continued, voice even. There was an attempt to adjust historical metadata related to the core branch. The head of engineering looked sharply at the CEO's son. He didn't look back. "That must be a system sync error," he said smoothly. "Repository logs are immutable without trace," legal replied. "The modification attempt originated from an executive-level administrative credential." Silence settled heavy and undeniable. He shifted slightly. Just slightly. "Are you implying misconduct?" "No," legal said. "I'm identifying risk exposure." Risk exposure. That phrase lands differently than accusation. It implies consequences without raising a voice. The head of engineering exhaled slowly. Why wasn't authorship clarified earlier? There it was, the real question. Because no one had asked, because visibility is often curated, because quiet builders are convenient. I assumed documentation would speak for itself, I said. The CEO's son's composure cracked, not dramatically, but enough. This is disproportionate, he said. We're talking about bonus deferrals. No, Legal replied. We're talking about fiduciary integrity. And that word, fiduciary, shifted the air entirely. The screen changed again. Internal presentations from the past 18 months. Slides outlining executive-driven architecture optimization, no individual attribution, no commit references, patterns, not malicious in isolation. But together, strategic. The head of engineering rubbed his temples. We need to correct the record, the CEO's son leaned back. Correcting slides doesn't change financial policy. Compensation decisions, Legal said carefully, that are influenced by incomplete attribution may require reassessment. He looked at me then, not irritated, not dismissive, calculating. You're forcing a review process that could ripple upward, he said. I requested transparency, I replied, and if this escalates to my father, there it was, the shadow behind the glass. Then, the review will include full documentation, Legal answered before I could. The room stilled again, because escalation wasn't threat, it was procedure. The head of engineering straightened. The core engine is mission critical. Removing or restricting its primary documented author during review exposes operational continuity. Operational continuity. Translation: don't destabilize the person holding the blueprint. Legal closed her folder. Preliminary findings indicate primary authorship aligns with repository documentation, she said. We recommend immediate correction of internal attribution records and suspension of bonus deferral decisions pending executive review. Suspension? The word hung in the air like a verdict, not punishment. Pause. The CEO's son's jaw tightened once more. He wasn't defeated, not yet. But the terrain had shifted beneath him. Very well, he said coolly. We'll revisit compensation. He stood, meeting adjourned, but as he reached the door, Legal added one final note. Further administrative changes to repository metadata will trigger automatic compliance reporting. He stopped, just for a fraction of a second. Then he walked out. The head of engineering lingered. You could have handled this quietly, he murmured. I did, I replied. For 2 years. Back at my desk, the internal wiki updated again. Core transaction engine, primary architect, my name, no fanfare, no announcement, just correction. By afternoon, HR scheduled a compensation framework reassessment discussion. Language had changed, power had adjusted, but as the sun dipped and glass towers began reflecting amber instead of blue, a new notification appeared on my screen. Executive review, attendance required. This time, the CEO would be present, and executive rooms don't operate on implication. They operate on stakes. The executive boardroom sat one floor above everything else, as if altitude itself conferred authority. The carpet was thicker, the chairs heavier. Even the silence carried a price tag. When I stepped inside, the CEO was already seated. He didn't resemble his son as much as people like to suggest. Where the son radiated polished ambition, the father radiated stillness, the kind built from decades of calculated risk. His gaze was direct, assessing without theatrics. To his right sat legal counsel. To his left, the head of engineering. His son stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, posture carved from pride. Thank you for coming, the CEO said. His voice was calm, almost warm. I've reviewed the preliminary report. That word again, review. I understand there are concerns regarding attribution and compensation, he continued. Concerns. Such a small container for something that had been quietly expanding for 2 years. Legal summarized, not emotionally, not defensively. Repository logs, primary authorship, attempted metadata modification, compensation deferral timing. The CEO listened without interruption. No tapping pen, no defensive lean, just attention. When she finished, the room held its breath. He turned to his son. Did you authorize an administrative review of historical repository metadata? His son held his gaze. I initiated a verification process. That wasn't my question. Silence thickened. Yes, he said finally. I reviewed access. The CEO nodded once, not approval, acknowledgement. And were you aware that such an action during an authorship dispute could be interpreted as interference? His son hesitated. Just enough. The CEO's attention shifted to me. You invoked Revocation Section 9. I did. Why now? There it was, the core of it all. Because compensation was formally paused for 2 years, I said evenly. And attribution affects valuation. He watched me carefully, not dismissing, not sympathizing. Why didn't you raise this earlier? The question wasn't accusatory. It was analytical. Because I assumed documented contribution would eventually align with representation, I replied. And because I was focused on system stability. The head of engineering shifted, almost uncomfortably. The CEO folded his hands. You built the transaction core. Yes? Alone? No. But I was primary architect and principal contributor. Legal slid a printed summary across the table. Clean columns, commit percentages, incident response ownership, uptime impact correlations. Numbers tell stories without raising their voices. The CEO studied the sheet for a long moment. Then he looked at his son again. Why was this not reflected in internal reporting? His son straightened. Because leadership visibility isn't the same as technical authorship. And yet, the CEO said softly, technical authorship appears to be the foundation of our revenue model. The temperature in the room shifted again. He leaned back slightly. We built this company on trust between clients, teams, and shareholders. Attribution integrity is not cosmetic. Not cosmetic, meaning not optional. He turned to legal. What is our exposure? Moderate, she said, escalating to significant if interference is established. He nodded. Then he did something unexpected. He faced me fully. What outcome are you seeking? Not revenge, not apology. Outcome. Accurate attribution, I said. Compensation review aligned with documented contribution and protection against administrative interference during legal review. Clear, bounded, lawful. He considered this. And if granted, then I continue building. No dramatics, no ultimatums, just truth. His son exhaled sharply. So she leverages a clause and suddenly policy bends? The CEO's eyes flicked toward him. Policy doesn't bend, it adjusts to facts. That landed harder than any raised voice could have. He stood. Decision posture. Effective immediately, he said. Internal records will reflect documented authorship. Compensation deferrals related to this matter are suspended pending recalculation. Administrative privileges concerning repository history are restricted during review. Restricted, a single word that redraws boundaries. His son's expression didn't collapse, but something in it hardened into understanding. The CEO continued. Furthermore, we will establish a formal attribution protocol across engineering. Transparency is preventative, not reactive. Preventative, meaning this wasn't about one developer anymore. It was structural. The meeting ended without applause, without visible defeat, just policy recalibrated in the presence of documentation. As I stepped out into the corridor, the city skyline gleamed beyond the glass. Same towers, same height, different weight. Back downstairs, notifications rolled in. Internal memo draft, Engineering Attribution Framework Initiative. HR, Compensation Review scheduled. IT, Administrative Access Policy update. Small changes, structural ripples. My desk looked exactly as I'd left it. Same keyboard, same monitors, same quiet hum of systems. But something fundamental had shifted. Not because I fought loudly, because I documented precisely. Late that evening, as most of the floor emptied, I received one final message. From the CEO, 3 sentences. Your work is valued. Ensure your documentation continues to reflect your impact. The company depends on clarity. Clarity. Such a simple word. Across the room, his son packed his briefcase. Our eyes met briefly. No hostility, no apology, just awareness. This hadn't been a battle of personalities. It had been a correction of record, and records, once corrected, tend to outlast pride. Still, as the lights dimmed and the office settled into after-hours quiet, one question lingered beneath the surface of the victory. When transparency becomes policy, who else's history might suddenly come into focus? The office didn't celebrate. No balloons, no congratulatory emails, no performative applause in Slack threads. Instead, something subtler unfolded. By Monday morning, the internal dashboard had a new tab, Attribution Transparency. It wasn't flashy, just structured fields linking features to documented primary architects. Commit histories surfaced in executive summaries. Architecture diagrams included names, small text beneath large ideas, quiet corrections, and yet the energy on the floor felt different, lighter, sharper. Engineers began revisiting old projects, updating documentation with precise authorship. Not out of ego, out of alignment. You could feel it in the rhythm of conversations, less guarded, more exact. Because when credit becomes traceable, trust becomes scalable. I didn't change desks, didn't request a new title, didn't ask for public acknowledgement. The compensation review happened behind closed doors. 3 days later, HR called me in. The recalculated bonus wasn't theatrical, it was simply accurate, adjusted to reflect measurable contribution over the disputed period. No dramatic back pay headline, just numbers corrected to match logs. We're formalizing contribution-weighted evaluation metrics going forward, HR said carefully. Translation, this won't happen again so easily. As I left the room, the head of engineering caught up with me. You realize, he said quietly, this will change promotion tracks. It should, I replied. He studied me for a moment. You never once raised your voice. I didn't need to. Because logs don't argue, they persist. Across the floor, conversations resumed their normal cadence, but beneath them ran a new undercurrent, a sense that documentation wasn't bureaucratic, it was protective. Later that afternoon, an all-hands meeting was announced. The CEO stood at the front, no slides this time. We've implemented a formal attribution framework within engineering, he said. Transparency strengthens innovation. No names mentioned, no incidents referenced. But his son stood slightly behind him, silent, composed. That silence said enough. When the meeting ended, people didn't swarm me. They didn't need to. Respect in technical spaces rarely arrives as applause. It arrives as inclusion. A junior developer stopped by my desk before leaving. Thanks, she said simply, for proving logs matter. I smiled. They always did. That evening, I stayed late, not out of necessity, but habit. The city lights flickered on one by one outside the glass walls, reflections layered over reality, like versions of truth depending on where you stood. I opened the code repository again. New branch, new feature proposal, clean architecture outline. The cursor blinked patiently. For 2 years, I had built quietly, assuming integrity would surface on its own. Now I understood something sharper. Integrity surfaces when someone anchors it in evidence, not through confrontation, through structure. My inbox chimed, an internal system notification. Attribution Protocol version 1.0. Active. Version 1. There would be refinements, improvements, iterations. That's how stable systems evolve. Across the office, the CEO's son passed by my desk on his way out. He paused briefly. "We're moving forward," he said. "Yes," I replied. "No tension, no truce ceremony. Just forward." He nodded once and left. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady. It streaked down the windows, distorting the city lights into blurred constellations. Beautiful, even in distortion. I committed my first change under the new framework. Author, my name, feature, stability. Optimization layer, timestamp, 9:42 p.m. The system processed the merge. No drama, no resistance, just confirmation. In the end, nothing exploded. No careers collapsed, no revenge was delivered. What shifted was quieter and far more durable. The record now matched reality. And when reality's documented, it doesn't need to shout, it simply stands and waits.